It all started with a garden hose and a woman who thought she ruled the world. There I was, standing in my own driveway, washing my pickup on a sunny Saturday morning, when two police cruisers rolled up, sirens off, lights flashing. Across the street, Charlotte Miller, our self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, stood in her hot pink suit yelling at the officers like she was the mayor. "He assaulted me with water," she screeched, pointing at me as if I'd committed a crime. One of the officers glanced at the dripping hose in my hand, then back at her. I could see the confusion in his eyes. Of all the things I thought I might be arrested for in life, refusing to wash someone else's car for free definitely wasn't one of them. Before I tell you how this circus got started, go ahead and comment where you're watching from, and subscribe if you love watching HOA drama unfold, because trust me, you're going to want to see how this one ends. My name is Donald Allen, and if you ask the old-timers on the cul-de-sac who I was before all this, they'd say I was the guy who kept to himself, mowed in straight lines, and waved at everyone the same way, 2 fingers up from the lawnmower handle like a metronome of neighborly peace. I spent 28 years as a civil engineer, drawing lines straighter than my hedges and calculating storm drains that could drink a hurricane. Retired now, I've got 2 hobbies: restoring a 2004 pickup to its former respectable roar and pretending I don't hear leaf blowers at 7 a.m. on Saturdays. Charlotte Miller hated both. Charlotte is the sort of person who walks like a gavel sharp, heels sharper angles, and a face that looks permanently laminated against dissent. She chairs the HOA like it's a bench trial, and the rest of us are defendants who forgot to wear ties. Her favorite color is authority, but she wears it in hot pink because she wants you to notice the jurisdiction cruising toward you from 100 yards away. 2 weeks before the police lights turned my driveway into a stage, Charlotte launched a crusade to restore community pride. She printed glossy flyers, Suncrest Meadows Community Car Wash and Spirit Day, and slipped them under everyone's doormat like a subpoena. The flyer had her face on it twice, once smiling with a sponge, once pointing at a bucket like Uncle Sam. The small print read, "All residents strongly encouraged to participate. Premium equipment owners expected to lead by example. Premium equipment in Charlotte. Speak meant me." Specifically, the pressure washer I bought after replacing my fence boards and realizing my concrete driveway looked like a crime scene for muddy tire prints. The machine is a temperamental beast that purrs like a cat and kicks like a mule, and I love it the way a chef loves a cast iron pan irrationally and with a respect bordering on fear. I stuck the flyer to my fridge with a magnet shaped like a trout and planned to donate $100 to the Spirit without donating my Saturday. If people wanted a wash, they'd manage fine with garden hoses and elbow grease. Suncrest isn't a charity case. Half the neighborhood owns cars nicer than the clubhouse's furniture. Besides, I've got rules about lending gear, no never, and not to people who say I'll bring it back tomorrow. The week leading up to Spirit Day, Charlotte's emails multiplied like rabbits. Subject lines screamed in relentless caps, "Remember Saturday sign-up slots," "Filling leadership opportunity equipment captains." She CC'd the board, the treasurer, and a mysterious advisory committee, which near as I can tell is Charlotte's cat and a mirror. Wednesday afternoon, she intercepted me on my walk. She materialized at the corner like a code citation clipboard pressed to her chest. "Donald." Her voice was a whistle, one of those sharp notes that pierce the cartilage inside your ear. "I have excellent news. You've been selected as pressure washer captain." Selected by who, I asked as if I didn't know. "By the board," she said, which in Charlotte language meant me. "We're very excited. You'll set up on the clubhouse loop. You can start with my Lexus at 8 sharp. I blinked. "Charlotte, I'm donating to the fundraiser. Cash. But I won't be participating." Her smile thinned. "Spirit Day is not about money. It's about community. It's about visibility. Leadership. Leadership through free labor," I said. She clicked her pen. "You have equipment. The community needs equipment. It's simple." "That equipment belongs to me," I said, smiling the way you smile at a toddler who's holding a stapler. "So does my Saturday." Charlotte's jaw tightened like a lid on an over-tightened jar. "I'm disappointed, Donald. Not just personally, institutionally." I said the only thing I could say that wouldn't turn us into a headline. "Have a nice day, Charlotte." 2 hours later, the first email arrived. Notice of non-compliant Spirit participation. The body was a salad of official-sounding words with no calories of actual meaning. "Your reluctance may be interpreted as failure to uphold the Suncrest standard." She CC'd the board, the treasurer, and for flair the community attorney, who, fun fact, is her cousin, who lives 2 towns over and advertises injury law on bus benches. I ignored it. I watered the gardenias. I oiled the gate hinges. I called my neighbor Joe, the one with the Mustang that never leaves the garage, and said, "Hey, you want to hide in my backyard Saturday?" He laughed for a full minute and said he'd bring donuts. By Friday, Charlotte escalated. She stuck a neon orange "Notice Landscape Review Pending" sign in my front yard, right next to the rosemary I trim with a measuring tape. Violation edging, irregular. I wanted to invite her onto the lawn and introduce her to a plumb bob and the lost art of keeping one's nose out of other people's grass. Instead, I did the one thing Charlotte had no defense against. I documented everything. I photographed the sign, I printed every email, I wrote the date and time on sticky notes and slapped them onto a manila folder labeled soap opera. Saturday dawned with the kind of weather postcards brag about: blue sky, honest sun, a breeze gentle enough to pet your hair but not strong enough to muss it. I made coffee, I tuned the radio to jazz, and I rolled my pickup into the driveway, because I will not be bullied out of washing my own car on my own property with my own hose. At 8:30, Suncrest Meadows transformed into a live-action commercial for Suds. Teenagers in HOA-approved t-shirts milled around the clubhouse with buckets. Parents lined up SUVs like prize hogs. Music boomed from a Bluetooth speaker, something with synthetic clapping and a beat that made my driveway vibrate. At 9, Charlotte showed up at the curb in her pink power suit like a flamingo at a traffic stop. She had a smartphone in one hand, a clipboard in the other, and an expression that could sour milk. "You're late," she announced. For what I asked, unspooling my hose. "For your assignment, we have a schedule." "I have a schedule too," I said, pointing to my truck. "This is it." She stared at the water sliding down my fender like it was a personal insult. "This is a community event. You can wash your truck later. I'm washing it now." I squeezed the nozzle, sent a friendly arc of water hissing across the hood, and watched the soap bloom into little clouds that sailed toward the gutter. Her eyes narrowed. She pivoted, and I swear I heard tendons creak. "You are obstructing community operations, Donald. You're siphoning water that could be applied to charitable vehicles." "Charlotte, I said this water is coming from my spigot, and it's colliding with my car, which is not a charity." "You are refusing to serve," then she said, voice rising. "I'm refusing to wash your Lexus for free, if that's what you're asking." A small audience collected neighbors with coffee cups and eyebrows halfway up their foreheads, pretending to check their phones. Joe appeared at my fence like a meerkat, a donut poised halfway to his mouth. Charlotte changed tactics. She softened her voice like an interrogator who's finished yelling and wants a confession. "If you bring your pressure washer over for an hour," she said, "I'll count it as 3 hours of service. We'll waive your late patio permit review, and I'll make sure your landscaping passes next month." "There is no late patio permit," I said, "and my landscaping passes every month." She smiled, a thin ribbon of teeth. "Are you sure?" Something settled inside me then, heavy as a stone finding its spot at the bottom of a pond. "Yes, Charlotte, I'm sure. Good luck with your fundraiser." She stared at the water again. Then she took 2 steps closer, close enough that the mist from my spray kissed the air in front of her nose. She lifted her phone, tapped record, and stepped another inch into the drift of droplets. "He's spraying me," she announced to the lens. "He's assaulting me." I pointed the nozzle straight down, shut it off, and let the hose lie quietly against the driveway like a sleeping snake. "Walk away, Charlotte." She blinked slowly, as if gauging how the scene would look on playback. Then she looked past me to the spigot, to the meter, to the puddles traveling toward the curb. "You know," she said, "the water bill is paid by the HOA. That's our water you're wasting. It's billed to me," I said. "Check your spreadsheets." "I'll do better," she said. "I'll check with the police." She dialed. She spoke with the authority of a queen making an order she expected to be carried out before dessert. When she hung up, she smiled like a cat who'd just sent a mouse a calendar invite. "They'll be right over," she chirped. "We'll resolve this properly." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I walked to the garage with the calm of a man who's installed more cameras than Charlotte has set warnings. I tapped my phone and made sure the front yard footage was streaming to the cloud. When I returned, Joe had migrated from the fence to my driveway. He offered me a donut like it was communion. "You good?" he asked under his breath. "I'm about to be very hydrated," I said. "You can tell a lot about a neighborhood by the way it reacts to sirens. Suncrest doesn't panic. It performs." The first cruiser slid around the curve with its lights throwing lace across the asphalt. Heads turned like sunflowers. The second cruiser parked behind the first. 2 officers stepped out, hands relaxed on their belts, faces arranged in that careful blankness they wear when the call sounded ridiculous over the radio, and they're hoping it's even stupider in person. Charlotte was already narrating. "Officers over here," she waved, imperious. He's refusing to perform his community duty, and he assaulted me with a high-pressure hose. He's also misusing HOA resources. One officer glanced at my hand, where the hose hung limply at my side, water barely dripping from the nozzle. The other officer examined Charlotte, as if checking for visible evidence of mortal dampness. "Ma'am," the first officer said, "are you injured?" "Humiliated," she snapped, "soaked, and disrespected." "Okay," he said slowly. "We'll talk to both of you. I was not worried. Not exactly. But my heart did that drum solo thing. It learned the year my roof sprung a leak during a thunderstorm. I've learned that in HOA, world truth needs witnesses and angles. Fortunately, I had both mounted under my eaves in sleek black housings that Charlotte once called hostile architecture. "Officers," I said, calm as a bank vault, "I have exterior cameras that recorded everything from the moment Miss Miller approached. You're welcome to review it." Charlotte folded her arms and smiled like I'd handed her a bouquet of plastic roses. "Please," she said, "do review it." I gestured toward the front door. "It'll take 90 seconds. That was the moment right there, standing in the doorway of my own house with a pair of cops behind me and a queen in pink, huffing in the sun, that I realized this was never about soap or water or even a Lexus that hadn't seen a raindrop in a month. It was about control. Charlotte didn't just want a clean car. She wanted me to bend, to obey, to demonstrate that her voice could make my Saturday kneel. I smiled to myself the way you do when the blueprint you drew on a napkin matches the building going up in front of you. If she wanted a scene, I'd give her a show starring timestamps, audio, and pixels sharper than her manicure. And that, dear audience, is exactly when the circus turned professional. The living room smelled faintly of coffee and clean carpet, a smell that usually means peace. But that morning, peace had packed its bags and left the premises. The two officers stood behind me as I navigated my security app on the TV screen. The footage flickered to life, me washing my truck, Charlotte pacing like an angry flamingo, and the moment she stepped right into the spray before announcing her attack. I hit pause. "As you can see," I said, "the hose wasn't aimed at her. She walked into it." One officer tilted his head, suppressing a smirk. The other glanced out the window at Charlotte, who was pretending to dab herself dry with a tissue. "Mr. Allen," the first officer said, "this footage makes it clear. You didn't assault her. She approached you, not the other way around." "Glad we agree," I said. He nodded. "We'll write this up as a misunderstanding. But it might help if you maybe don't engage with her directly. These HOA disputes tend to spiral." "Trust me," I said, spiral is her favorite shape. When I walked them back out, Charlotte was waiting at the end of my driveway, arms folded, voice sharp enough to cut asphalt. Well, she demanded. "Are you arresting him or not, ma'am?" the officer said, keeping his tone professional. "There's no crime here." Charlotte's jaw dropped. "No crime. He wasted HOA water. He's refusing to cooperate with our community initiative." The officer looked genuinely confused. "It's his property, ma'am. His spigot, his hose, his car. There's nothing illegal about washing your own vehicle." Her face turned a color somewhere between red wine and fire hydrant. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Not by a long shot." Then she stomped off toward her Lexus, slamming the door so hard the echo rolled down the cul-de-sac like thunder. You'd think that would be the end of it, that common sense would win the world, would move on, and Saturday mornings would go back to being about lawnmowers and lemonade. But no. Charlotte Miller didn't lose gracefully. She lost strategically. By Monday, I woke up to find a bright yellow envelope taped to my front door. Notice of community-sanctioned noncompliance and disrespect toward HOA authority. It read like a court document written by a drunk paralegal. According to the new HOA standards, residents who fail to participate in mandatory volunteer programs could face escalating fines. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. But the fines kept coming. $50 for failure to demonstrate community spirit. $75 for improper water use. $25 for rude verbal tone. Every envelope was stamped urgent in bold red letters, and every one came signed by Charlotte Miller, HOA president. By midweek, she'd started a campaign against me. Her gossip spread faster than wildfire on dry grass. Suddenly, I was that guy, the selfish neighbor who refused to help anyone who harassed the HOA president who acted like he owned the place. Well, technically I did own the place. But that kind of logic doesn't survive in the kingdom of Charlotte. I caught snippets of her performance during my morning walks. "Oh, I'd love to help Donald," she'd say loudly, "to anyone within 10 feet, but he's just so difficult. You know how some people are." It was a clever tactic, death by reputation, and it worked at least for a while. Some neighbors started avoiding me, others whispered behind mailboxes. Even Joe joked that if I disappeared, he'd check the clubhouse first. I wasn't angry yet, just disappointed, like watching a smart kid cheat on a test when they could have passed on their own. So I did what engineers do when faced with chaos. I collected data. Every fake notice, every email, every snippet of gossip caught on my security mic. I stored it all in a folder labeled Community Compliance Exhibit A. The following Thursday, Charlotte escalated again. It was 6:15 a.m. I was halfway through my first cup of coffee when I heard the whine of an engine outside. I opened the blinds and saw a bright orange city truck parked across my driveway. A man in a neon vest was pounding a maintenance violation stake into my grass. "Morning," I said, stepping outside. "What's going on?" he shrugged. "Got a work order from HOA management. Says this address's sprinkler system is leaking." "Funny," I said, "since I don't even have a sprinkler system." He looked at his clipboard, frowned, and muttered figures. Then he climbed back into his truck and left, leaving the stake like a tombstone marking the death of patience. Across the street, I caught a flicker of pink. Charlotte stood behind her mailbox, watching through her sunglasses, lips curved into a tiny, satisfied smile. That was the moment my sympathy evaporated. She'd turned petty into professional art. I opened my garage, fired up my laptop, and drafted a formal complaint to the county housing board. I attached screenshots, timestamps, videos, and copies of every ridiculous fine. I CC'd the city inspector, the local attorney general's office, and just for good measure, the HOA's insurance carrier. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Later that afternoon, Charlotte showed up on my porch pretending to be civil. "Donald," she said with a too sweet smile, "we need to talk." "About what?" "About your attitude." My attitude? I leaned against the doorframe. "You mean the one that prefers minding my own business?" She sighed dramatically, like she was about to faint from the weight of my sins. "Look, you've made things uncomfortable for everyone. The HOA board agrees you're not contributing." "Charlotte, the HOA board is you." "That's beside the point," she said quickly. "This neighborhood works when everyone respects the rules." "Rules," I repeated. "You mean the ones you invented last week?" Her eyes flashed. "If you don't cooperate, I'll be forced to take official action." "Charlotte, you already did. About 20 times, none of it's legal." She straightened her clipboard like it was a badge. "Then maybe you'd like to explain that to a judge." I smiled. "Maybe I would." She blinked, thrown off by my calm. "You think this is funny? I think it's recorded," I said. "You're on camera right now, Charlotte. Everything you've said since you stepped on my porch." Her lips parted, but no words came out. She glanced toward the tiny black lens above my doorbell. "You can't." "I can," I said, keeping my tone even, "and I already have." For the first time since I'd met her, Charlotte didn't look like she was in charge. She looked cornered. She tried to recover with a smirk. "You're making a mistake, Donald. You can't win against the HOA." I gave her a small nod. "Maybe not, but I can sure make the HOA follow its own rules." She left without another word, her heels clicking down the steps like gunshots. By the next morning, the entire community email list lit up. Charlotte had sent a long, furious message titled Urgent Community Dissent. It was basically a press release accusing me of undermining neighborhood unity and filing false reports with county officials. What she didn't know, or refused to believe, was that my complaint had already reached someone higher up, a compliance officer named Ethan Reyes, who didn't take kindly to HOA presidents forging bylaws. Within 2 days, Ethan emailed me back, requesting a meeting. He wanted every piece of evidence I had, and oh, I had plenty. When the letter from the county arrived addressed to Charlotte Miller, President, Suncrest Meadows HOA, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She stormed down to my house 10 minutes after reading it, waving the notice like a battle flag. "You think you can embarrass me," she barked. "You're done here, Donald. Done." "Charlotte," I said evenly, "you called the police because I didn't wash your car. You forged documents. You fined me for tone of voice. I think embarrassing yourself was the one thing you didn't need my help with." Her face went rigid. "We'll see what the board says about that." "Good," I said, holding up my coffee mug. "Tell them to bring donuts." She spun around and stormed off again. Joe, who'd been trimming his hedges nearby, whistled low. "Man, he said she's gonna pop a vein." "I know," I said, watching her disappear into her house. "And I'm gonna make sure the whole county sees the pressure build." Because Charlotte Miller thought she was untouchable. She thought HOA, letters, and fake bylaws could scare me into submission. What she didn't know was that I'd spent half my life designing systems meant to withstand pressure. And the thing about pressure, when it builds too high, something's bound to break. You'd think Charlotte would take the hint after the county notice arrived, a thick envelope stamped official inquiry. But no, Charlotte Miller didn't retreat when cornered. She doubled down like a poker player holding a pair of twos and bluffing her way into ruin. The following Monday morning, I found her in front of my house again, this time with a camera crew, well, technically her teenage nephew holding an iPhone on a selfie stick, recording a dramatic community safety update for the HOA. Newsletter. She was narrating to the camera with theatrical fury. Some residents, she said, glaring directly at my porch, continue to threaten our shared harmony, refusing cooperation, wasting communal water, and spreading falsehoods about your HOA leadership. Her nephew tried not to laugh, the camera shaking slightly. Charlotte, I said, stepping out onto the driveway with my coffee, is this your new YouTube channel, or just public harassment? She pivoted toward me, one hand raised like a courtroom objection. You are on HOA property. I gestured around at my lawn, my mailbox, the driveway I'd poured myself. You mean my property? The HOA governs all visible surfaces, she declared, including driveways. I took a long sip of coffee and nodded. That's bold, Charlotte. You might want to call NASA too. They can probably see this driveway from space. Better file for jurisdiction. Her face twitched. You are mocking an elected official. I didn't realize we held elections in your living room, I said. That was when she snapped. Enough. I will not be humiliated by a washed-up engineer with too much time on his hands. Well, I said, you're halfway there. She stomped toward me, finger raised like she was about to conduct an orchestra of outrage. You will regret this. I'll have you removed from this neighborhood. The HOA can evict anyone who's hostile to community values. Charlotte, I said calmly, the HOA can't evict a property owner. That's not how ownership works. Her face darkened. We'll see. Then she marched back to her Lexus, threw her clipboard onto the passenger seat, and roared off, nearly clipping her nephew in the process. By that afternoon, my phone was buzzing again. Subject mandatory, HOA hearing non-compliance review. Charlotte had scheduled a disciplinary session for Thursday evening at the clubhouse, attendance required. I could have ignored it, but something in me wanted to end this circus once and for all. So I showed up. The clubhouse smelled of old carpet cleaner and artificial lemon. Charlotte sat at the head of the folding table like a judge about to hand down a sentence. Beside her were two board members, her neighbor Karen from Lot 7, and an elderly man who looked like he'd been promised cookies for showing up. A dozen residents filled the folding chairs. Most were there for entertainment. HOA drama in Suncrest Meadows was better than Netflix. Charlotte banged her gavel, yes, she owned one, and said, "This hearing is now in session." I raised an eyebrow. You're aware this isn't an actual courtroom, right? She ignored me, Mr. Donald Allen, you stand accused of repeated defiance toward HOA, leadership misuse of shared resources, and public disrespect toward this board. Public disrespect, I asked. You mean when you filmed yourself trespassing on my driveway? Gasps fluttered across the room. Charlotte smiled like a teacher scolding a child. Your sarcasm is noted. Do you deny using HOA water for your personal car wash? I pay for my water. Do you deny refusing to contribute to the community event I donated $100? You refuse to accept it. Do you deny verbally assaulting the president of the HOA? I laughed. You're the president, Charlotte. You're also the accuser. Kinda convenient, isn't it? She leaned forward, eyes gleaming. You think you're clever, but rules are rules. You are hereby fined $500 for willful noncompliance and insubordination. I glanced around the room. A few residents looked uneasy. Others were biting back laughter. Joe, seated in the back, mouthed, "She's insane." I folded my arms. Charlotte, I'm not paying a dime. This isn't legal and you know it. Charlotte slammed her gavel so hard, the head popped off and bounced onto the floor. Then you leave me, no choice, she hissed. I'll be contacting the police again. That's when something inside me shifted. Not anger, not fear, just a quiet, solid resolve. Good, I said, standing. Call them. I'll wait. I walked toward the door, but before I left, I turned back. One more thing, next time you try to find someone, make sure your bylaws are actually registered, because the county's been very interested in yours lately. Her face went pale. The color drained from her cheeks like someone had unplugged her ego. The next morning, I met with my friend Sheriff Tom Grady at his office downtown. He'd served with me years ago in the Army Reserve, and now ran the local sheriff's department with the kind of calm authority that made people sit up straight without being told to. Tom skimmed through the stack of papers I'd brought: Charlotte's fake fines, the police report from the hose assault, and the county's inquiry notice. After a few minutes, he whistled. She forged HOA letters, 3 of them, I said, all with a fake board signature. Tom leaned back in his chair. Donald, this isn't an HOA issue anymore. That's fraud. Thought so, I said. He rubbed his chin. I can't act yet, not without a warrant, but if she keeps sending this nonsense, we'll have grounds. Keep every piece of correspondence, every call, every text. Oh, don't worry, I said. I've got more evidence than she has pink blazers. Tom chuckled. Then sit tight. Sometimes you've got to let a storm blow itself out before you rebuild. Or, I said, you redirect the flood. He gave me a knowing grin. Just don't do anything stupid. I left his office with the quiet satisfaction of a man holding a loaded truth in his back pocket. Over the next week, Charlotte went full tilt. She emailed residents accusing me of interfering with official HOA business. She claimed the county investigation was fake news. She even distributed flyers that said, "Protect our community from disruptive influences." Someone slipped one under my door. The headline had my house number printed in bold. Charlotte had crossed from petty tyranny into full-blown delusion, so I gave her one last chance to stop. I drafted a short, polite letter. Dear Miss Miller, I am officially requesting that you cease all defamatory statements and fraudulent fines issued under the name of Suncrest Meadows HOA. Continued harassment will result in legal action under State Statute 456.1, a fraudulent misrepresentation by a homeowners association. Sincerely, Donald Allen. I printed it, signed it, and hand-delivered it. She didn't answer the door, but I could see her curtain twitch. The next day, she called my bluff, or thought she did. It was Friday afternoon when 2 patrol cars rolled down the street again. I recognized one of them, Deputy Harris, who'd been there during the hose incident. He stepped out looking half amused and half embarrassed. "Mr. Allen," he said, "we got another call from Miss Miller." "Of course you did," I said. "What's the accusation this time?" "Illegal possession of a sponge. She says you threatened her with legal action." I grinned. "Guilty as charged." He chuckled. "I figured. Mind if we check in with her? Be my guest," I said. From my porch, I watched them walk across the street. Charlotte burst out of her house like she'd been waiting behind the door, waving my letter like evidence from a crime scene. She pointed toward me, shouted something about intimidation, and gestured wildly. Deputy Harris read the letter, exchanged a look with his partner, then calmly folded it and handed it back. They talked for about 5 minutes. Then the officers climbed back into their cars and drove away without even looking at me. Charlotte stood in her driveway, dumbfounded. That was the exact moment she realized her power was slipping, that her authority was a balloon losing air, shriveling faster every time she screamed. I raised my coffee cup in a little salute from across the street. "See you in court, Madam President." She didn't reply, just stared, trembling pink suit glinting in the sun like armor starting to crack. Because now, for the first time, Charlotte Miller wasn't fighting a stubborn neighbor. She was fighting the law, and the law had better lawyers than she did. The silence after that last police visit was almost eerie. For 3 full days, Charlotte Miller didn't set foot on my property line, didn't send an email, didn't wave her clipboard around like a weapon of mass irritation. The neighborhood actually felt peaceful. The lawns were quiet, sprinklers hissed in rhythm. Kids rode bikes without adult supervision, turning it into a committee meeting. For a brief, almost surreal moment, it felt like Suncrest Meadows might finally be normal again. But if I've learned anything from dealing with control freaks, it's this: when they go quiet, they're reloading. The storm came that Friday afternoon. I was in the garage, changing the oil in my truck when my phone buzzed with 3 consecutive notifications. Email 1, urgent OA notice, pending legal action against Donald Allen. Email 2, subject public safety alert, harassment and defamation. Email 3, you will regret crossing me. The last one wasn't from the HOA email address. It was from Charlotte's personal account. I sighed, wiped my hands on a rag, and muttered, "And here we go again." I opened the first email. Charlotte had CC'd the entire community mailing list. It was a wall of text accusing me of slandering the HOA, fabricating evidence, and creating hostility among residents. At the bottom, in bold red letters, she'd written, "The OA board is pursuing legal action against Donald Allen for defamation and property damage." Property damage. The only thing I damaged was her pride, and maybe her false sense of authority. I stepped outside to get some air, but of course she was already there, standing across the street, arms crossed, her expression triumphant. "You really don't quit, do you?" I called out. "I warned you," she said smugly. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. Now you'll face the consequences. You forged documents, Charlotte. I filed a legitimate complaint. That's what you think," she sneered. "But guess what? The board backs me up." "The board," I repeated. "You mean Karen and the guy you bribed with cookies?" Her nostrils flared. "We're moving forward with litigation. You'll receive notice soon." I laughed genuinely this time. "Litigation, you realize that's public record, right? You'll have to provide actual evidence." She smirked. "Oh, I have evidence. Wait and see." Then she turned and marched back inside, slamming the door so hard her welcome sign fell off the hook. That night I went to dinner at Joe's place. His wife Marlene made meatloaf and poured the kind of bourbon that makes people tell the truth. "You should sue her," Joe said between bites. "If she keeps slandering you like this, you'll have grounds for harassment." "I'm working on it," I said. "The sheriff's building a case. Fraud, forgery, maybe even misuse of HOA funds." Marlene frowned. "Misuse of funds, yeah," I said. I pulled the HOA's annual budget from the county website. There's a line item for community beautification projects, $18,000 spent last quarter. Only problem is not a single improvement was made. Joe whistled. "Let me guess Charlotte handled the payments. Every cent," I said. "I've got copies of the invoices. Same handwriting, same signature." Marlene leaned forward. "If that's true, she's not just corrupt, she's criminal." "That's the plan," I said, tapping my temple. "We're gathering everything." By the following week, I had help. Ethan Reyes, the county compliance officer, called to confirm an official audit had been approved. He sounded almost giddy. "Mr. Allen, I've seen a lot of HOA drama in my career, but this one's special," he said. "We've already found discrepancies in her filings. She's claiming reimbursements for non-existent expenses, landscaping, painting, even catering." "Let me guess," I said. "Paid to herself." "Or a company under her name," Ethan replied. "We'll know soon." That was all I needed to hear. The dominoes were lining up. All I had to do was give them a little push. But Charlotte wasn't done fighting. A few days later, I noticed a strange car parked across from my driveway. A man inside was snapping photos of my house. I walked out, approached the car, and asked, "Can I help you?" He rolled down the window, flashing a fake-looking badge. "Private investigator. Miss Miller hired me. HOA business." "Uh-huh," I said. "You might want to tell Miss Miller that filming private property without consent is trespassing. She says you've been vandalizing HOA equipment," he replied. I laughed so hard I had to grab the mailbox for balance. The only equipment I've touched is my pressure washer. He looked uncomfortable, mumbled something about just doing his job, and drove away. Charlotte watched the whole exchange from her porch, clutching her phone like a detonator. 2 days later, she made her final mistake. She sent out a community update email claiming she'd spoken directly with the sheriff's department and that Donald Allen is under investigation for fraud and harassment. That, my friends, is called defamation. I forwarded the email straight to Sheriff Grady and to Ethan. Within hours, I got a reply. "We've seen enough. We're filing charges for document falsification and impersonating an officer of the county." "Sit tight, Donald. This is about to get interesting." And oh, it did. Friday morning, 10 a.m. I was sitting on my porch with my usual coffee when the first police SUV rolled into the neighborhood, then another, and another. Charlotte, seeing the flashing lights, burst out of her house like a starlet walking the red carpet. "Officers," she cried, "over here," but this time they didn't come to her. They walked right past her driveway and stopped in front of mine. For a brief second, my heart dropped until I saw Sheriff Grady step out of the lead vehicle, a folder in hand and a knowing grin on his face. "Morning, Don," he said. "Mind if we use your driveway for a minute? Be my guest," I said, standing aside. Grady turned toward Charlotte, who was frozen mid-gasp. "Miss Miller, I have a warrant to search the Suncrest Meadows HOA office for financial misconduct, forgery, and fraudulent communications." The color drained from her face. What?" "This," he said, holding up a document, "is signed by the county judge. We've got your emails, your fake notices, and your reimbursement claims. You might want to call your attorney." I don't have," she stammered. "Then you're going to need one," Grady said. Behind him, deputies were already walking toward the clubhouse carrying boxes and laptops. One of them taped a property seized by county investigators notice to the HOA office door. The neighbors had gathered in clusters along the sidewalks, whispering and filming on their phones. Joe sidled up next to me. "You did it," he murmured. I shook my head. "No, she did. I just built the dam. She broke it herself." Charlotte stood rooted to the spot, her pink suit now several shades paler under the morning Sunday. Grady approached her gently. "Miss Miller, you're being placed under temporary suspension as HOA president pending investigation. You're not under arrest yet, but I'd advise you to cooperate." She looked around, desperately seeking sympathy. But none came. The neighbors who once feared her now watched silently. "You can't do this," she said weakly. "I am the HOA. Grady adjusted his hat. "Not anymore, ma'am." He turned back to me, gave a small nod, and said quietly, "Nice work, Don. You kept it clean and legal, just the way we like it. Charlotte was still standing there when the cruisers pulled away, clutching her clipboard like a lifeline. I went back to my porch, sipped my coffee, and whispered, "And that's the end of that wash cycle." The wind carried the sound of her porch door slamming shut. For the first time in months, the air in Suncrest Meadows felt light again, and this time, the silence wasn't eerie. It was victory. If the story had ended with Charlotte Miller losing her throne and retreating quietly, life in Suncrest Meadows might have gone back to birdsong and barbecues. But Charlotte wasn't the retreat quietly type. She was the kind who sank with her ship while shouting orders to the ocean. For the first few days after the investigation, she stayed invisible curtains drawn porch light off Lexus missing from the driveway. The neighborhood felt blissfully normal. Kids played basketball on the cul-de-sac. The retirees walked their dogs without feeling judged. Someone even dared to plant unapproved flowers, orange lilies no less, in full defiance of Charlotte's infamous landscaping code. But then the emails started again. The subject line was pure Charlotte Suncrest update, the truth they don't want you to know. It was a manifesto nearly 2,000 words long, accusing me of orchestrating a personal vendetta, claiming the county investigation was politically motivated, and alleging that Sheriff Grady was involved in a cover-up. She even wrote, "Our community has been infiltrated by false patriots posing as heroes." My inbox lit up as neighbors forwarded it to me with messages like, "Is she serious and do we need to move?" I didn't reply to any of them. The best weapon against a drowning ego is silence. But Charlotte couldn't stand silence. By the following week, she was back in person, this time standing at the HOA clubhouse in front of a small crowd of loyalists. She'd roped off the entrance with pink caution tape and hung a handwritten sign, "Emergency Town Meeting, Residents Only." Of course I showed up. As I walked up the path, one of her followers, a nervous man named Dennis, tried to stop me. Charlotte said this is for members in good standing only." "I am in good standing," I said. "Check the bylaws, or better yet, ask the county auditor." I walked past him. Inside, Charlotte stood behind the folding table like a talk show host, waiting for applause. She was in full costume again, the bright magenta suit, pearls, clipboard, and a fake smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ah, Mr. Allen," she said smoothly, though her voice trembled. "Glad you could join us. We were just discussing the future of this community, one without hostility." "That sounds lovely," I said, taking a seat near the front. "You planning to start by apologizing?" She chuckled, that thin, brittle sound people make when they're pretending to be in control. "I think we both know who should apologize." "I do," I said. "You." A ripple of laughter ran through the crowd. She glared, then raised her hand dramatically. "Order. This is still a formal HOA meeting." "No, Charlotte," I said, standing up. "It's not. You were suspended." "This isn't a meeting, it's an illegal assembly," the crowd murmured. Someone whispered, "Wait, is that true?" "It is," I said, turning to face them. "She's under investigation for fraud and forgery. The county seized her records. She's not authorized to conduct any HOA business." Charlotte slammed her clipboard on the table. "Lies, all of it. He's been conspiring with county officials to destroy me." "Destroy you," I said. "Charlotte, you did that yourself. You forged signatures. You used HOA funds to buy handbags and spa vouchers." "That's not true." "Then explain the receipts," I said, pulling a folder from my bag. "Public record, county audit. You spent $1,200 at a boutique in Orlando. For what, landscaping?" She froze. The audience went silent. Her mouth opened, then closed. Finally, she hissed, "You had no right to access those files." "I had every right," I said. "They're public. The residents paid for them. You just never expected anyone to check." Her veneer cracked. The professional posture collapsed into raw fury. "You think you've won. You haven't won anything. You're a lonely, bitter man who hates authority." I leaned forward. "I don't hate authority, Charlotte. I hate abuse of it." The room went dead quiet. You could hear the ceiling fan whir. Then someone in the back, Marlene Joe's wife, stood up. "Charlotte, we believed in you. We trusted you. You said this HOA was for everyone. What happened to that?" Charlotte's eyes darted toward her, desperate. "Marlene, please. You don't understand. Donald's manipulating all of you." "No," Marlene said. "We just finally see what you are." The silence that followed wasn't victory, it was excommunication. Charlotte's shoulders sagged. She gathered her papers, muttered something about ungrateful people, and stormed out. The moment the door closed, half the room exhaled in relief. Joe grinned. "Well," he said, "that's one way to drain the HOA swamp." But I knew Charlotte wasn't done. That night, my motion sensor camera pinged at 11:42 p.m. I checked the feed, and there she was. Charlotte Miller in her pink suit jacket over pajama pants creeping through my front yard with a flashlight. She was pointing it at my water meter, scribbling notes on a clipboard. I stepped onto the porch and called out, "Taking measurements, Charlotte, or just spying again?" She jumped, like she'd seen a ghost. "I'm conducting a water audit," she barked. At midnight, the HOA reserves the right to inspect. "You're not the HOA anymore," I interrupted. "You're just trespassing." She froze. The camera's infrared light glowed red in the dark, catching her face perfectly. "You need to leave," I said calmly. "Now." She opened her mouth, then thought better of it. Without another word, she turned and hurried back to her house. By morning, the footage was already on Sheriff Grady's desk. He called me later that day, chuckling. "Don, you really can't make this stuff up. Midnight trespassing, she's giving us the rest of the evidence we need." "What happens now?" I asked. "Well, the county's preparing a formal criminal complaint. She'll probably get charged with misuse of funds and harassment. Not jail time, but enough to end her HOA career permanently." "Good," I said. "She's earned an early retirement." The arrest came quietly 3 days later. A single unmarked cruiser pulled up to Charlotte's house around noon. She didn't resist, just stood there on the porch while the deputy explained the charges. I watched from across the street, not out of malice but out of disbelief that it had actually come to this. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. The pink blazer looked less like armor now, and more like a costume she'd outgrown. When the deputy guided her toward the car, she glanced at me for the briefest second eyes, full of something that wasn't anger anymore. It was humiliation, maybe even regret. The cruiser pulled away. The neighborhood fell completely silent. No one cheered, no one gossiped. Everyone just exhaled. That evening, Sheriff Grady called again. "It's over," he said. "The county froze the HOA's accounts until new elections are held." Turns out she'd been paying herself a monthly leadership stipend. "How much?" I asked. $2,000 a month, I whistled. "That's one expensive ego," he laughed. "Well, you can sleep easy now. Suncrest's officially under caretaker management until the residents vote." "You'll get a notice soon." "Thanks, Tom," I said. "And for what it's worth, I hope I never see another HOA letter again," he chuckled. "Be careful what you wish for, Don. Peace and quiet can be boring. Boring sounds like paradise right about now." When the call ended, I sat on the porch with my coffee, watching the sunset wash over the cul-de-sac. For the first time in months, the only sound was the rustle of leaves and the soft hum of sprinklers. Freedom smells a lot like wet grass. I raised my mug in the direction of Charlotte's dark house. "Rest in peace, Madam President." And for once I meant it. Because even though she'd been the worst kind of neighbor, nosy, manipulative, self-righteous part of me still pitied her, she'd built her whole identity around control. When that control crumbled, there was nothing left for her to stand on. But me, I still had my home, my integrity, and my favorite old pressure washer humming quietly in the garage. Proof that sometimes the simplest things are the hardest to take away. For a week after Charlotte's quiet arrest, Suncrest Meadows felt like a neighborhood in rehab, shaky, apologetic, careful with its volume. People waved again. Joe brought over ribs. Marlene planted those outlaw orange lilies with a grin that said, "Come find me now." I slept like a man who'd finally turned off a humming noise he couldn't find for months. Then the county scheduled an open forum at the clubhouse, a public briefing on the HOA audit and interim plan, and this part made my coffee taste sweeter. Member Q&A. Sheriff Grady would be there, along with Ethan Reyes, the compliance officer with the patience of a librarian and the appetite of a bloodhound. I arrived early. The folding chairs were set in neat rows. Someone had even vacuumed the decades-old carpet lines into military precision. The podium held a single microphone with blue tape around the Cable County property tag. On the wall behind it, the faded HOA banner, "Community is a Verb," slouched like it had given up on grammar. Neighbors filed in a little curious, a little nervous, a lot relieved. I took a seat on the aisle, a habit I never broke even after office fire drills stopped being a thing in my life. Joe slid in beside me, carrying a Ziploc of sunflower seeds like we were at a ball game. "Think we'll get fireworks," he whispered. "County-grade fireworks," I said, "the kind with receipts." At 10 on the dot, Ethan stepped up, glasses, gleaming a stack of binders that looked exactly like the justice I believe in: boring, methodical, complete. "Good morning," he began. "My name is Ethan Reyes. First, thank you for your patience. We know it's been a lot." He tapped the binders. "Here's where we are. Our preliminary audit covers the last 18 months of Suncrest Meadows HOA expenditures." He clicked a remote. A screen flickered to life behind him. Slide 1, budget versus actuals, columns, numbers. The room leaned forward. We found disbursements labeled beautification projects totaling $54,200. Of that, we can verify $9,600 sprinkler repairs, mulch 2 broken street lamps. The remaining $44,600 went to 2 vendors. He clicked. Suncrest Community Services LLC and CLM Advisory Group. A murmur. Joe elbowed me. CLM, Charlotte Louise Miller. Could be coincidence, I said, and the Titanic could be a puddle. Ethan continued, voice steady. Both entities list a PO. Box registered by CL Miller. Both deposit into the same regional bank. We've secured records. We also have evidence of fabricated board minutes approving reimbursements that were never actually voted on. Slide a scan of minutes. The signatures 3 different board members looked suspiciously like one very confident pen. A hand shot up. Marlene. So, she paid herself. In multiple ways, Ethan said. Reimbursements for catering, outreach, consulting. There are boutique purchases in Orlando coded as uniforms and spa charges categorized as stress mitigation for leadership. He didn't smirk. I appreciated that. We're referring the findings to the district attorney. He paused to let the numbers finish wrecking the room. Then the county has frozen the HOA account. We'll install a caretaker management firm for 90 days. After that, you'll elect a new board. Meanwhile, fines and enforcement actions are suspended unless mandated by safety code. It landed like rain on a fire. Someone behind me clapped. Others followed. A few people cried. Joe said, caretaker management. That's like when your uncle takes the keys after Thanksgiving. I nodded. Exactly. And he actually knows how to park. Ethan yielded the mic to Sheriff Grady, who tipped his hat, a motion that quieted the room more effectively than the mic itself. Folks, he said, I'll keep it simple. We're charging Miss Miller with forgery, filing false instruments, and fraudulent misrepresentation. We're not here to humiliate anyone or burn down a neighborhood. We're here to protect it. If you receive letters, fines, disciplinary notices, save them. If you paid money that seems off, bring your receipts to the county desk today. We'll log and reconcile. He scanned the crowd, landing briefly on me. And if anyone feels harassed or threatened, tell us now. You don't have to live with that. He stepped back. Ethan returned. Questions' hands exploded. A man asked about late fees. A young mother asked if her paint color would finally be approved. An older couple wanted to know who was refunding their patio review surcharge. Ethan answered, patient as a stone. Then my name was called. Mr. Allen, would you care to say something? You filed the initial complaint. I don't like microphones. I like drawings with scales and notes in the margins. But I stood, walked to the front, and took the mic that still smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. My name's Donald Allen, I said. Most of you know me as the guy who mows straight and waves twice. A ripple of laughter. I didn't set out to be the HOA's hall monitor. I just wanted to wash my truck and be left alone. But Charlotte turned no thank you into a felony scene. She used rules as a weapon instead of a boundary. That's not community. That's control. I gestured at Ethan's slides. This is what happens when we stop asking to see the math. We trusted a person instead of a process. We forgot that authority is a tool, not a personality trait. I put the mic down because anything more would turn into a sermon, and I'm not ordained. Applause, not wild. Warm, the good kind. And that's when the doors at the back swung open. Charlotte Miller walked in. Not the polished empress we knew. This was Charlotte on minimum voltage. Beige blazer instead of pink. Hair pulled back too tight, eyes rimmed red. Beside her, a man in a tan suit carried a briefcase and a face that could invoice you for breathing. My client will speak, the man announced, not asking. Sheriff Grady didn't move. Ma'am, you're out on bond. This is a county-led meeting. You may sit and listen. Charlotte's lawyer stepped forward. We're filing an injunction to halt any removal actions. The charges are unfounded. Miss Miller has documentation. Ethan tilted his head. We seized the documentation. That's how we know she has none. The lawyer flinched, regrouped. Charlotte took the mic with hands that shook. You're all making a mistake. Donald has manipulated this. He's been hostile from the start. Her eyes found me. He assaulted me. He's been surveilling me. I have paperwork. Her voice wavered. The old spell wasn't working. And when magic fails, you see the wires. Miss Miller, Ethan said gently, this isn't the place. She ignored him and reached into her bag, producing a white envelope. Then I'll do it the proper way, she said, walking straight at me. The lawyer followed like a tugboat steering a sinking ship. She thrust the envelope into my hands. Consider yourself served. I looked down. Notice of Lien Suncrest Meadows HOA Beautification Enforcement. Recorded. Document number. Amount due $2,750 plus administrative costs. Executed 3 weeks ago. Signed, Charlotte L. Miller, President. The room gasped in a single inhalation. Sheriff Grady stepped in, took the paper, and read faster than I speak. He turned to Ethan. You seeing this? Ethan's brow folded. That's a recorded instrument. If it's fraudulent, it clouds his title. I finished. My voice was even. Engineers don't panic when they find rot. They circle it and start calculating. Charlotte saw the ripples she'd made and mistook them for tide. He refuses to pay fines. He undermined the board. The lien is justified. Board authorizations, Ethan asked. In the minutes, she said. The minutes you forged, he said softly enough that it was almost kind. Her lawyer tugged her sleeve. Charlotte. But Charlotte was beyond counsel. She was auditioning for absolution. I did what I had to save this neighborhood from people like him. He thinks rules are optional. He thinks he's above Miss. Miller Grady said, voice like a door closing. Placing a fraudulent lien is a felony in this state. You recorded this after receiving notice of investigation. The lawyer finally found his brakes. Sheriff, my client will not answer further questions. That's wise, Grady said. He handed the lien back to Ethan, who slid it into a transparent sleeve like a butterfly being added to a collection. Ethan turned to me. Mr. Allen, we'll move to expunge this lien with the recorder's office. You'll get a letter of clearance. In parallel, we'll add this to the complaint folder. I nodded. Calm. That stone in the pond had found bedrock again. Charlotte wasn't done. You can't erase it. He'll have to disclose it on any sale. Lenders will see it only until a judge signs the vacatur, Ethan said, and will be requesting sanctions for slander of title. Something in her expression cracked then, not just the anger, but the scaffolding that held it. She looked around and finally seemed to see the room. Not the audience she commanded, just neighbors she'd lost. She dropped the mic. The thud echoed more than her words. Her lawyer collected her with the care of a man shepherding a weather balloon through a cactus field. They left without slamming the door. The room exhaled as one organism. Ethan cleared his throat, squared the binder, and brought us back to concrete. All right, back to the path forward. We'll take your questions in groups of 5. And just like that, the neighborhood remembered how to be a neighborhood, asking about pool keys, mailbox repairs, potholes, paint swatches. Government the good kind. Boring like oxygen. When it was over, people shook my hand. Some apologized for believing the gossip. I told them there was nothing to forgive. Fear makes fiction sound like fact. Joe and I stepped into the afternoon Sunday. You okay? He asked. Better than okay, I said. She fired her last cannonball. Now it's paperwork and patience. He grinned. 2 things you eat for breakfast. I walked home, slow envelope in hand, thinking about the way Charlotte's eyes looked when the room didn't bend for her anymore. Authority had always obeyed when she shouted. Now authority spoke back in commas and codes and statutes that didn't care about pink blazers. Back on my porch, I opened the envelope again and examined the numbers, the notary stamp, the little lies dressed as lines. On the 3rd read, a detail snagged me. The assignee field at the bottom, lien holder of record, may assign to Suncrest Meadow Partners upon default. A P.O. box I didn't recognize. Not the same P.O. box as CLM advisory. Huh. I pulled my laptop, typed the name into the county registry. Suncrest Meadow Partners LLC. Registered last month. Agent of record Dennis Loom. Dennis, the jittery gatekeeper from Charlotte's emergency meeting. The man who told me members in good standing only. The match struck in my brain and landed on dry tinder. Charlotte wasn't alone. She'd been laying tracks not just for control but for cash flow. Assign the liens to a shell, buy the debts on the cheap, turn neighbors into revenue streams. And if I hadn't said no to a garden hose, we'd still be smiling for the newsletter while someone emptied our pockets with legal-looking forms. I closed the laptop and stared at the cul-de-sac. The kids chalking galaxies on the asphalt. The retirees walking dogs whose names are longer than the dogs themselves. The way the light fell on Joe's ridiculous flamingo statue. I don't like fights. I like foundations. But sometimes you shore up a neighborhood by taking a sledgehammer to the rot. Okay, I said to the quiet. Let's finish this. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid that part had burned out of me months ago, but because my mind wouldn't stop building blueprints. Every loose end needed anchoring. Charlotte's downfall had exposed more than corruption. It had revealed a system so easy to exploit, it was practically an invitation. That new LLC Suncrest Meadow Partners was the proof. It had popped up right before the lien was filed the same week Charlotte got suspended. Someone was trying to inherit her scam to keep the machine running even after its operator crashed. By sunrise, I had a plan. I brewed a strong pot of coffee, sat at my dining table, and began tracing connections. Charlotte's company CLM Advisory Group shared an address with Suncrest Meadow Partners. Both used a virtual mailbox in the next county over. Same forwarding service, same signature pattern. And the registered agent Dennis Loom, Charlotte's obedient little foot soldier, the one who'd guarded her fake emergency meeting. Dennis had been quiet since the investigation began. Too quiet. I called Joe. "You busy this morning?" He yawned through the phone. "Not unless coffee counts as work. Bring 2 cups. And your drone." By 9 o'clock, Joe and I were parked down the street from a rundown office park where Suncrest Meadow Partners was supposedly headquartered. The building looked like it hadn't hosted an actual business since the Clinton administration. Faded signs read things like Tax Prep and Palm Insurance Group. Joe launched the drone from his truck bed, the little thing buzzing up like a mosquito with a camera license. We watched the feed on his tablet. "There," I said, pointing. "Suite 204. Through the grimy window, we saw 2 desks, one stacked with dusty folders, the other occupied by none other than Dennis Loom hunched over a laptop. Joe zoomed in just enough to catch the logo on the screen, Suncrest Meadow Partners, Community Property Liens Portal. He whistled. "So it's real. Real enough to be criminal," I said. "He's processing liens." "Probably on everyone who challenged Charlotte," Joe grinned. "You recording this?" "Oh, I'm recording everything," I said, and forwarding it to Ethan in about 5 minutes. 2 hours later, Ethan called back, voice sharper than usual. "You were right, Don. We traced the filings. Dennis Loom submitted 6 new liens this month under that LLC, all for bogus HOA violations." "Who's on the list?" I asked. He read off names: the retiree couple from Lot 14, the single mother who painted her shutters blue, even Joe. Joe looked up from across the table and mouthed, "No way." Ethan continued, "We're moving fast on this. The DA's office is drafting an injunction to freeze any transfers from that company. If Dennis tries to sell those liens, we'll nail him." "Good," I said, "but you'll need witnesses. People who can confirm the harassment." "I was hoping you'd volunteer," Ethan said. "I figured as much." By the next morning, the neighborhood buzzed again, but this time with hope, not gossip. The county sent 2 investigators to collect statements. Residents lined up at the clubhouse handing over letters, photos, and receipts. You could feel the tension dissolving like dust in rain. Marlene hugged me when it was her turn. "Donald, you saved us. You really did." "Don't thank me yet," I said. "This isn't over until Dennis is in cuffs." She smiled knowingly. He's not half the operator she was. Maybe not. But snakes don't always strike with the same head. That afternoon I was back at home when a knock rattled my front door. Standing there was Dennis, sweat on his forehead tie askew and a manila envelope in his shaking hands. "We need to talk," he said. I didn't invite him in. "If this is about your new business venture, I already have your website bookmarked under evidence." "Donald, please," he stammered. "You don't understand. Charlotte made me do it." I folded my arms. "Charlotte's out on bond, Dennis. She can't even send an email without approval." "I know, but she planned it before she got caught. She said if anything happened, I should keep the HOA alive. She promised I'd get paid." He looked desperate, cornered. "I didn't know it was illegal until the sheriff showed up at my office." "You filed 6 fraudulent liens, Dennis. She said they were legitimate, said you were trying to bankrupt the community. I thought I was helping." "Helping yourself, maybe." He wiped his forehead. "They froze my account. I don't have money for a lawyer. Please, Donald, tell them I cooperated." I studied him for a long moment. There it was, the final domino trembling, ready to fall. "Fine," I said. "But you're going to help me clean this up." He blinked. "How?" "By testifying. You're going to hand over every file Charlotte gave you. Emails, invoices, fake signatures, everything. I could go to jail. Or you could go home tonight and start over," I said. "Your choice." He swallowed hard. "Okay, I'll do it." By sunset, Dennis sat in my kitchen with Sheriff Grady Ethan and a laptop full of incriminating data. Charlotte had planned more than we realized. The files showed months of preparation, forged amendments to HOA bylaws, template lien forms, even instructions on how to create urgency by staging fake violations. It was a con built on legal jargon and fear. Ethan flipped through the folders, eyebrows lifting higher with each click. "This isn't amateur work," he muttered. She studied the statutes, knew exactly how far she could push before hitting a felony, and then pushed anyway. Grady shut his notebook with finality. "Well, now she's past the line." He turned to Dennis. You've done the right thing, you'll get leniency. But you'll testify. Dennis nodded, pale but relieved. I will. When they left, Ethan lingered. You know, Don, we don't often see citizens follow through like this. Most people just want the noise to stop. I'm an engineer, I said with a small smile. Noise means there's a loose part somewhere. He chuckled. Well, thanks for tightening the bolts. You've saved this community a lot of pain. A month later, the new HOA elections were held. This time, there was no pink suit, no clipboard, no grand speeches about community values. Just folding chairs, coffee, and people who actually listened. Joe nominated me for president. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my donut. No thanks, I said. I'll help draft the rules, but I'm not wearing the crown. The room laughed, and for once, it wasn't cynical laughter, it was human. Marlene ended up winning the vote. She promised transparency, shorter meetings, and zero tolerance for HOA dictatorships. Everyone cheered. When she walked up to me afterward, she said, I owe you a car wash. I grinned. Make it a community one, but this time voluntary. As weeks passed, the neighborhood truly changed. The new board refunded unjust fines, reopened the pool, and even threw a small block party. Kids chalked Welcome Back Suncrest on the street in pastel colors. And me, I sat on my porch, watching the lights fade across calm lawns, feeling something I hadn't in a long time, peace earned. Charlotte's trial came and went quietly. She pleaded guilty to 2 counts of document falsification and 1 of fraudulent filing. Probation, community service, restitution. The judge's words still echo in my mind. Authority is not ownership. Leadership is not control. I heard later that her community service included repainting road curbs, ironic considering how many violations she'd written for chipped paint. Dennis took a deal, testified, moved out of state. Last I heard, he sells insurance now. Legal insurance. Sheriff Grady still drops by for coffee. Sometimes we joke that the Suncrest saga could be a movie. He always says the same line. Wouldn't be believable. No jury would buy a story that crazy. Maybe he's right. But when I think back on it, the flashing police lights, the forged papers, the pink blazers, the midnight trespasses, I realize something deeper. People like Charlotte don't appear out of nowhere. They grow in the cracks of complacency. And sometimes all it takes to expose them is someone willing to say no, even if it's just about washing a car. Power doesn't corrupt by magic. It corrupts when good people stay silent, when neighbors look away, when it's not my problem, becomes the community motto. I learned that justice isn't loud, it's steady. It's paperwork, patience, and persistence. It's standing your ground without shouting, letting truth do the talking, while lies burn themselves out. So, if you ever meet your own Charlotte Miller, remember this: you don't have to fight dirty to win. You just have to keep your hands clean and your cameras rolling. Now it's your turn. What would you do if your HOA president tried to control your life? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe, because trust me, in this neighborhood there's always another story waiting to be washed clean.